I'm Jennifer Ludwig. You may know me more from my previous job with Technodigit in France, working for 3D Reshaper. I'm now very happy to organize this webinar to show you the latest news on Cyclone 3DR.
Thanks, Jennifer, and we're really happy that you're joining us today. I've been involved in non-contact measurement for some time now. My background is originally surveying and spent many years in industrial measurement, and now find myself happily coordinating the reality capture segment for Leica Systems in Australia and New Zealand. I'm also amazed in the new ways 3D scanners and the resultant data is being used, and it's a very exciting area to be involved in. So we've told us a little bit about ourselves. It's time for you to tell us about you. So we have our first poll question tomorrow, which she's going to bring up in a second.
Okay, we'd like to know, what software do you use for your reality capture workflow currently? Please select all answers that apply from the following: 3D Reshaper or Leica Cyclone 3DR, Cyclone Register, Cyclone Register 360, or you may be using something else. We'll give you a few moments.
These poll questions are always interesting to see the results.
Okay, I can see the answers are rolling in, and it seems that most of you have answered, so I'll be closing the poll now. And let me share the results.
Okay. Yep. So across the board, that's great to see. Fantastic. Okay, we've got, just before we get started, we've got one more poll question to ask you.
So we're really getting to know you now. How long have you been using 3D Reshaper or Cyclone 3DR? Please select from one of the following: never, less than 6 months, 6 to 12 months, 1 to 3 years, or more than 3 years. Okay, I can see that most of you have now answered, and I'll be closing the poll.
Okay. Well, that's actually really good to see, because that means we're starting to speak to some new people, which is great. Excellent. Okay, so we'll get started. Obviously, we have an agenda today. We'll be presenting the new Cyclone 3DR, followed by some workflows, which Jennifer will be going through. We'll also be talking about licensing and migration paths, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A session, which we always look forward to. So Leica Systems can take you from the field to a deliverable using a number of workflows. In the field, you could be using our reality capture devices, such as the BLK 360 or RTC 360, and both can be used with Field 360. It's been great to see on all the socials the number of people that have been using Field 360 on a phone. You could also be using a P-series scanner. All your scans from multiple devices can then be brought together using either Register or Register 360. And this can then be shared using our Jetstream technology, which could then be consumed in a number of ways, such as Cyclone 3DR, which is what we're showing you today.
So what is Cyclone 3DR? For those of you who haven't heard about it yet, or haven't seen it, or haven't heard about 3D Reshaper, never used it, this is a bit a view of what type of applications this software can be used for. So it's a software that's dedicated to point cloud processing, and it can be used in all sorts of domains like surveying, but it goes from civil engineering to cultural heritage to architecture, or through specific workflows even for tunneling. The core of the software is really 3D meshing, so there's different ways to create meshes, and we're going to see one of them in the workflow just afterwards. A big part of the software is also to be able to do some measurements, but do some inspections, verifications, and then report those heat maps of deviations in the easiest way possible. And another part of the software is texturing, to be able to create realistic rendered models. So here you have a little view of a global view of the software, and where does it fit in the workflow? So typically 3D Reshaper gets in a point cloud. It can come from all type of sources. It has to be registered. So that means that if you're doing terrestrial laser scanner, you need to register your data first together, potentially Cyclone if you're using some Leica scanners, and then bring that point cloud in. Once you have it in, very often the first step is to clean this point cloud, maybe cut out the piece that you want to work on or get rid of all the items that are not needed for your computation. There's all sorts of tools that help you to do that inside the software. And very often the second step is to create a mesh out of this point cloud to then have a surfacing model to work on. Once you have a mesh, there's a lot of possibilities of results that you can compute. As we said, monitoring is one of the application where you could do an as-built inspection and see whether everything has been built according to plan. You can also do some volume computations, whether it's for stockpile measurements or it's for tank volume, for example. There's a full workflow for a tunneling application that lets you create cross sections along the axis of the tunnel or a road to potentially see, check like clearance profiles or check the thickness of shotcrete. Once you have a mesh as well, some algorithms work way easily and more automated as well. So for example, a break line extraction is nearly instant on a mesh. Here you can see a little picture of an open pit where we're extracting the front lines, but it could be also extracting curb lines, for example. And once you have this mesh model, to make it more realistic, it's possible to apply the pictures from the scanner or from external cameras onto that model to give it a really good rendering. And one of the last workflows that had been added into the software was a full workflow for tank analysis, so inspection and calibration, really dedicated workflow. So what's interesting in this software is that it's a good platform for all types of point cloud to potentially be combined together. But what's also interesting is that it computes all sorts of results, but also lets you export those results in deliverables, which very often are PDF reports, which we're going to see some examples afterwards, but you can also export just the data themselves in DXF, etc. So what is changing today for those of you who have been using 3D Reshaper already before? It's basically the name of the software and the interface. So in the workflow itself, there's not too much change. If anything, there's improvement with a better interoperability with the Leica product and the Leica software. So that's still the same core workflow.
Perfect. And I think that's one of Cyclone 3DR strengths, is just the sheer flexibility of the software. You can use it in so many different ways, and which is fantastic. So with Cyclone 3DR, we've taken the popular features of 3D Reshaper and reimagined them with a simple new user interface based around common workflows. Users can quickly move from project creation to completion along guided workflows.
So as you'll see, the interface has changed. It's now more in the same colors as Cyclone Register 360, so it's all a bit more grayish and red. We have now some add-ons from Register 360 that have been brought on board. Like on the right of your 3D scene, you would see all these little tools to switch between a panoramic view, an orbit view, etc. It's good to know that all the previous hotkeys are still working, so X, Y, Z to change your view, or the zoom all, etc. And by default now, Cyclone 3DR will be using the way of moving from the mouse from Register 360, but you have the choice to change that if ever you did like the way Reshaper was handling it, and potentially you might flick between one and the other depending on what you'd like to see in the data set.
Yep, that makes sense. So one of the things that is new is that CloudWorks now comes standard with Cyclone 3DR. This creates interoperability with other Leica Geosystems products and enables you to do things such as open a model space view, Jetstream enterprise projects, or LGS files. You can quickly create user coordinate systems, which is very important. You can also create, view, and edit limit boxes. Some of you may have noticed that there's a new button called the Convert to Cloud button. At the moment, this is required to optimize the point cloud to use in Cyclone 3DR, and this will be removed in the future. However, it has to be said, importing an LGS file and converting that, it's still actually faster than importing an E57 file, for example. So we've also introduced some smart pick functions, and this is to make it easier to perform tasks which are typically associated with what we would call a detail survey, which is documenting the location of features such as street furniture, lamp poles, street signs, footpaths, retaining walls, etc. And that's just by a simple digitizing process. There's new segmenting tools as well to give you more flexibility for focusing on the particular area that you're interested in, which is important. And Jennifer will be showing you some of the one of these in a second, which is the wall and floor filter. One of the really exciting new features is the ability to import an IFC file or even a native Revit file, which you can be used for verification and inspection workflows, which is becoming more and more important. So here, I'm just going to go for a quick workflow. We're going to import an LGS file, and you can see that that opens up straight away. This is some BLK 360 data outside the Leica Geosystems office in Melbourne. What we're looking at is actually some street furniture. These are actually seat benches in the shape of a number, 420. And you see, I'm just going to quickly convert this to the 3DR, Cyclone 3DR point cloud. And as I said before, it's very quick to do this. And this means it's optimized. So one of the things that you first might want to do is you can see if I go to the standard top view like that, you can see that it's not really in a user-friendly orientation. So one of the things that I generally tend to do is create a quick user coordinate system. In the CloudWorks menu tab, we can create a quick UCS. There's a number of different ways we can do that. Here I'm just going to use a wall and floor or floor and wall. So I've clicked a point on the ground. The software is just determining where a plane is, and then I click a point on the wall, and that creates a new user coordinate system there. So now, when I go to the top view and zoom out a bit, you can see that the orientation is a lot more user-friendly. The next thing you might want to do is create a quick limit box. So again, I can go to the CloudWorks tab, use the limit box by clicking 3 points. First point and the second point define the plane, and then the third point defines the volume. So now I'm really just isolated the area that I really want to look at. Double clicking on the limit box enables you to edit it, so you can just do simple push pull, which is very user friendly. I can hide that limit box, and now we can start to focus on what I want to do. So if I go now to use these new smart pick tools, I can create a curve, and using say a high point, if I just hover along the face of that seat, you can see it's picking the high point. If I choose the lowest point, the same thing, I'm just hovering along the face of that bench seat, and you can see it's picking the low point. So there's a few situations where it's useful to be hovering on one point, but actually locating the point somewhere else. And basically here I'm doing is creating a path. So just hit enter, and that completes that function. I can take this a step further. I could create a simple line. So if I go choose the line function, here I'm making sure I'm snapping to the end of that curve I first created, and then I can just pick an XYZ point and complete that. So now I have a line. If I hide that point cloud, it makes it easier to see what I've just done. And what I have is a profile curve or profile line. If I go to the reverse engineering tab, click extrusion, pick the path, and I can quickly preview that. We can see we have a quick surface that's been created. So I can easily change the color of that just to make it a bit easier to understand what I'm looking at. If I turn the point cloud back on, we can see that that is a pretty standard reverse engineering workflow. And obviously I could have created the profile curve to better represent the bench. But as I said, that's a quick way to create UCSs and use the new smart pick functions. Okay, so this leads us to our third poll question tomorrow.
Okay, we'd like to know, where does your data come from? Please select all answers that apply. Your UAV or photogrammetry, terrestrial laser scanners, you may use a multi-station, mobile mapping, or it may be something else.
Be very interested to see the result of this one. Who do you think is going to be the most, Jennifer?
Probably terrestrial, but we might be surprised.
We might be. It's always interesting to see these results.
Okay, I think we have all the voters that have voted come through. So we'll be closing the poll. Let me share the results.
Yeah.
Okay, spot on, Jennifer.
Excellent. But the other one is the UAV photogrammetry. That's
quite
heavily
high.
used as well, which is very interesting. Oh, that's fantastic. Great, thanks for that.
Perfect. So now we're switching to the workflow demos of this webinar. So we chose two workflow to show you as much as we could of the software. So some functions are well known, but you're going to see them used in this new version of the software and with all the new functionalities that have been added. Our first workflow will be to bring a cloud in, clean like cloud, create a mesh of it and do a texture. And so this is what Greg has been scanning down in Melbourne. It's a piece of art, a sculpture on a way. So he's been scanning that with the BLK, as you can see in this little picture. And we're gonna look at this file. So what we've done is that the BLK setups have been registered together with Register 360, and out of Register 360 we've exported an E57 this time. So what's interesting in this new Cyclone 3DR is that when you import an E57 file, it now lets you choose whether you want to import the cloud or the images or both of them. So that's a bit a different workflow concerning the texturing that I thought would be interesting to show you. So let's now go to the file itself and you'll see what it looks like. That's it. So this is our full scan setup. So you can see we've got a few of them there. And if I zoom in, you'll see that now with this new import, we're seeing all the position of the scanners and seeing those images there. So what it allows you to do even is go to one of them and then position yourself on the camera viewpoint. And that way you can look around and see the full 360 image around. You can play with the transparency to understand what has been scanned or not, potentially understand what you're looking at. So that's a real plus in this new Cyclone 3DR. And we'll use the pictures afterwards. So now we'll do the workflow. So we still have all the clouds separately because we haven't unified anything. It's just the E57. So what we'll do is that I might hide those images for the moment, take all the clouds and merge them into one point cloud. That's very often the first step you do in 3D Reshaper. So for those of you who've been using 3D Reshaper before, you'll see that the menus have changed a little bit. So you might not always find the function you're looking for straight away. So a little tip for you is to do Control Q on your keyboard and you have this quick menu that shows up. And for example, here I'm looking at merging my cloud, so I can type merge, and here you see in which menu this is going to be in. So extract object cloud, but you can also just click on it and that's going to start this function.
Good tip.
And we'll say okay, and here we are, our cloud is just one cloud now. So what we'll do next is that I'll switch to an orthographic view and I'll click on Z on my keyboard to have a top view, and we only want to create a mesh of the statue itself, so we're going to be just selecting that. So select the point cloud, go into the clean menu. The clean menu is pretty much what was in the cloud menu before. So if I do clean and separate, I don't know if you've ever used freehand contour, but that's the one I'm using now. So you can very easily just draw around the area that you're interested in. If ever you did a mistake, you can always move those red control points a bit further to refine a bit the area that you'd like to select. And what's really good in Cyclone 3DR is that now that you've done your contour, it's actually possible to extrude it. So now I'm only selecting what's within this volume, and I can, for example, not select the floor anymore, but just select the statue itself. And potentially that means we're not having any noisy points that could be on the top there. So now that we've done our selection, I can choose to just keep that and delete everything around it, or I can just choose to split it so that I'm actually not deleting anything, but keeping the surroundings as well. So I'll say okay to that. And now that I've got just this, I can click right, say show only, and that's it. We've got our point cloud ready. So you can see that we still have a couple of points here and maybe some points a bit around that are a little bit noisy. So there's a second filter that's pretty good to use. It's this one, and I'm just going to do it that way. If I play that, you'll see that now all the little dots have been cut out from the main point cloud because they're further away from the main surface. So you couldn't really see these points there, but this filter is deleting that for you. So if we say delete the smallest one, that's it. Now we do have a perfect clean point cloud to start to mesh. Now that we're ready to mesh it, we're going to go to surface modeling, and in here you can go to 3D mesh and start creating your mesh. So remember to always create a mesh in 2 steps. This is how you can create the best results. And here this setting is basically the size of the triangles that we're going to create on this statue. So I'm entering 50 mil at the moment. Once you put preview, we're seeing the results straight away. So we can see that we have a good looking mesh. What's always interesting to do is click right and change the representation to have a look at the triangles through flatten wire. And if I zoom in, you can see now that those triangles are pretty much regular and the same size all over the whole mesh. So that's okay, it's good on the shape. What we see though is that at the bottom here, we might want this line to be a bit better defined, and the outside here as well. Those are a bit too regular actually. So this is why we're meshing in 2 steps. So now that I say okay, this opens the second step of this dialog box. So we're going to refine the cloud, and I'm going to do it at 2 millimeters and allow to create quite small triangles to go in all the details. So what's happening now is that the point cloud is still in the background, and our mesh is getting refined thanks to it. So I'm saying that I don't want my mesh to have a bigger deviation than 2 mil from the original point cloud. And now if you look at the triangles, you can see that they're nicely aligned along the curves and the edges that we have in this shape. And if I say okay now, because we're happy with that mesh, I can change that back to smooth. And when you've got a good mesh, a good result, one indication is when you cannot really see the triangles when you're in a smooth representation. So that's it, our mesh is done. Obviously at the top we don't have anything because we didn't put the VR key on a higher tripod. It wasn't possible really to scan the top of it. So we're having holes there. So what we could do, because we do want to create a nice model, that we could fill those holes. And I'm just going to select those 3. And what Reshaper lets you do is that it's going to compute for you what might go there. So this is actually interpolating the shapes that are in these holes based on all the triangles that are around it, and that's creating the shape for you. So this is giving quite a good result because we have enough points for it to continue like that. It's also possible to do something else. If I say okay, next, now let's say we wanted to get a 3D print of that statue, I would also have to close the bottom because you'd need a closed mesh for that. But the bottom, we do want to close it in a flat way. So I'll just untick the curvature filling option and click on preview, and that's just flat there. And that's it. We have our mesh ready to go, completely closed like that. So obviously here, because it's a nice piece of art, the main thing is actually missing, which are the colors of this mosaic on top of the statue. So this is when we'll be able now to texture it. So I'll just show all the pictures, and you can here pick and choose which picture you might want to use. I'm just going to select all of them with the mesh and go to the texture menu. And here, because these images have been imported through an E57, when I click on texture from images, we actually have nothing to do. All the positions of the camera is already saved in, the orientation of the camera, etc. So I simply have to do preview to check the result. And those textures are applied automatically on the model. And that's what's bringing the interesting part in this model here. So obviously at the top we do not have everything, so that it's hard to improve that. The one thing that's not available yet in Cyclone 3DR, but that was here in 3D Reshaper, is a function to adjust the textures. So to help a bit with the transition from one picture to the other. This is a tool that was there, so it's going to be added in Cyclone 3DR as well, but in a further version. There's a couple little things like that that haven't been put through Cyclone 3DR yet, but they definitely will all be there in the next versions. So we can say OK now, and we've got our model. So what we could potentially do with it to share it with someone could be to export that into a 3D PDF. So if you've never opened a 3D PDF, I recommend you test it, because that's a good, a very easy way to share 3D data with anyone. So we're now exporting that, and nearly everyone has a PDF reader on their computer, so sharing that makes it pretty straightforward to send the data to someone instead of asking what type of format they're looking for. So if I just increase that, you always have to trust the document, and then when you click in the scene, what happens is that it's going to load it, and then it lets you turn around and look at all the texture on it. So that's your full 3D data here. That's it. That could be your deliverable for that model.
Yeah, and there's a few really good things about that. One is the mesh was a really good looking mesh. The triangles were evenly shaped. There's not, wasn't a lot of thin triangles, so a really good looking mesh, and it was a watertight mesh. Like you said, you could send that to a 3D printer or something like that, scale it down. And this workflow of adding texture is a great way, because you can have a really lightweight mesh, but you can graphically add those textures, so that makes it easier for people to use downstream as well. That was really good, Jennifer.
Thank you. So that was our first workflow, and we're going to switch to something quite different, but to see this other side of the software, which allows you to do all sorts of measurements and inspection. And we're going to see a workflow with an as-built inspection. So Reshaper has always had those functionalities in. What's exciting now is that Cyclone 3DR can also import Revit and IFC files straight away, which means that when you have the model of the building you're working in, you can easily scan it and then compare your scan straight to it to understand whether everything is in order or not. So we'll switch to the demo. And again, I'm going to show you a full workflow with that data set. So for the moment, we don't have anything in here. And what I'll do is that I'm going to load an LGS file. So it's some data that we've scanned with the RTC in our Brisbane office here. It's not a big scan, but basically we've scanned the corridors around the center of our office here. So this is what the point cloud looks like. It's not cleaned or anything. It's the full LGS file. And now what we'll do is that I'm going to import a Revit file. So I'm just drag and dropping the Revit file .rvt in here and importing that. So what's important when you want to compare scan data to CAD models is that you need to have them in the same coordinate system. There's different ways of doing that. Here they're already both aligned, so I just need to click on whichever part of the file I want to load, and I just loaded the whole one this time. So I'll say OK. And so here you see that the data is perfectly on top of each other. If I hide the point cloud, you'll see that it's a very simplistic Revit model. It's only a few walls because that's all we're interested in, to check whether those walls are still correctly in position. So now I cannot compare straight away that point cloud to the Revit model. You can do a few things on the LGS file directly, but not the inspection. So what we need to do is convert that cloud to a Reshaper cloud to start to work with it. What's interesting though is that you can import a very big LGS, but then just convert the part that you'd like to work on. And this is exactly what we'll do. So in the CloudWorks menu, we can go here in the limit slices, and so Greg showed you the limit boxes. I'll show you the slices, where if your point cloud is in a coordinate system that's aligned with it, we can here pick 2 points to do a slice along the x-axis, and then I can do just the same with the y-axis, and we're actually only interested in that corridor here. So that's the only thing that we're going to keep visible here, like that. And now when we convert to cloud, it's only this part that is being converted to a point cloud and not the full LGS file. So what's good is that you're working only on the part that you need. So the workflow becomes very efficient, because you can still show and hide whatever else was around it and then convert the next part, etc. But you don't really need to load a very big data set anymore as a PTS or an E57. So here we go. We've got our point cloud ready. Because we're interested only in the walls themselves, what we'll do is that I'll hide the Revit model, and here I'll show you one of the filters that is interesting as well. In the clean menu, we can here do walls and floors separation. So I'll just hit preview. So it's not brand new in this version. It's been out since the last version, but it's quite an interesting tool to gain efficiency as well when working, especially in buildings. So what this function does is that it's going to create 3 point cloud. One will have all the points from the walls, one will have all the points from the floors and ceilings, so horizontal surfaces, and a third one will have whatever else there is in this point cloud. So you can easily see that in this point cloud we have a bit of noise and some furniture around inside, things hanging on the wall, etc. And now it's done, so you can see the different colors, so blue for horizontal and orange for vertical. I'll say okay to that, and now in our point cloud group we have 3 point cloud, and we can hide the floors and the others, and now we're having only the walls there, and that's all I want to work with. And I'm not going to bother about all the other things we see, because you'll see that in the inspection we can take care of that. So, and I'll show the Revit model as well, and to compare those two together, I'll first select the Revit model and then the walls, because it's the point cloud that we're going to compare to the Revit model. And to do that analysis, it's in the analysis menu, and the compare inspect function has now been split in all for you to see all the types of comparison that can be done. And here we've selected cloud and CAD, so this is what we can play. So in this case, all the points from the cloud are going to be projected on the Revit model. And so we're going to know the deviation in every single point, and we're going to see that through a heat map. So, and the heat map, we want to see it on the measure object, which is our point cloud. So I'll hit preview. And what I've done as well here is that I've set that the max distance for the computation is 100 mil. That means everything that's more than 100 mil away from the Revit model will just be ignored. And that's why I don't need to spend too much time deleting and cleaning everything, because it automatically shows me just the walls. So what's we can already see a bit what might be happening, but very often when you do an inspection like that, you do need to go and edit the color scale. So if I go in a color scale now, you'll see what color scale we have for the moment, and you see that Reshaper creates that mil range automatically for you at plus minus 10 mil. What we'll do is that a very easy way of editing this color scale is to select the tolerance, and this one simply gives you a green area for what's within tolerance, and then red and blue for what's outside tolerance. So let's say our tolerance here is actually 20 mil. So I'm just going to modify those two values. Now everything that's green is within plus minus 20 mil from the Revit model. Everything that's red or blue is further away than that from the model itself. If I say okay here now, and I validate this result. What's very interesting in Reshaper is that each time you compute something, you can open the report here and it will have some data prepared for you. So that's just the cover page that you can personalize as much as you need. But the second page is what's interesting. Here you have Reshaper has automatically created a picture for you to have in that report. So if ever you want to add more things in that report, for example, here we can see that that wall has a bit of a bump potentially, but we can see here there's this big part in red. So let's zoom onto that to understand what's going on. So we'll just go back into the home menu. And if I look in this, I might go into a top view. You'll see that this part is blue, which means that these points are further away in this direction from the model, and these ones are red, so that's a positive deviation. So these ones are in this direction, so that means that this wall is actually further in than it should be, and this wall is also further in than it should be. So that corridor is actually narrower than it's supposed to be on plan. So that's very important to know, obviously, if there's anything that needs to be done in that corridor or things that need to get through. So what we could do to add a bit more information there is go back to the analysis, and here you can, for example, just pick 2 points. There's all sorts of measurements you can do, but we'll just do distance between points. And I can pick 2 points here on one wall and the other wall. And what I'm doing is I'm just showing the distance along the y-axis, because my data set is perfectly aligned on this coordinate system. So this is the y-axis. So the width of this corridor is 1.72 meters. And if we say OK, now we might want to add a screenshot of that in our report so that we put this information in. You can do that through the view menu. You can save a view set, and when you do that, this arrives in the other object here, so you can potentially just rename that. So I'll rename that corridor, and if now we go to the report and I go back to that page, what I can do is that at the bottom of this, I'll just remove this one. At the bottom of this, I have a plus, so I can click on that to add another area. And on the right, you can see that my view set is right there with the corridor. So I can bring that in, and now I have this close-up added to the report as well. So what I could do as well is add a little title to it. So here I want to add some text. So I'm going to say zoom on the west corridor, for example, like that. And I could put that text in the middle, make it a header so that it's a bit bigger as well. And potentially here, what I can add as well is a page break so that this next bit goes on to the next page inside the PDF. So I'll just add this, and here you go. That's the report that we can have. So if I print that to PDF, I'll just call that inspection 1. That's generating the picture. So what you see here is pretty much what you're going to get inside the PDF, and this is what we have. So that's the first page, and if I slide down, that's our second page with all our information. So first page with the main image, and second page like that. So it's super easy to have your result ready in a few clicks, and even personalize your report to have really something that corresponds to what you need. And that's the end of this workflow from import to deliverable.
Yeah, that's, like you said, Jennifer, that's really important, because it's pretty relatively straightforward to create a heat map, but to be able to make a report fast and simply and have it tailor-made to what you need to do, and then make it quick to hand that report to someone, that's the crux of this whole process. Yeah, great.
Perfect. So we thought we'll just say a couple words about scripting as well, because that's a very important part in the software potentially. So the idea is that the software lets you write your own script, so it could be useful for you to automate a workflow. So let's say you're doing the same inspection every week or every month, and instead of having someone behind the computer just clicking onto the same things each time, you could easily write your own script that imports the data, process the result the way you want, and then export either a report or data as well. The script can also be used to write your own workflow. So that's interesting if you're working on a specific application and you need to have a specific set of functions used one after the other. The language used is JavaScript, which is quite easy to use, and there's plenty of help online to learn that. What's good to note maybe is that 3D Reshaper has GitHub platform where they share some of the free scripts that they write or they get from other customers. And what's quite good in this Cyclone 3DR now is that they've actually added some of the scripts by default in the script menu. So it's those buttons that you see here. You can add your own favorites, but those two are there by default now. So the electric line extraction was a script that's existing since a while, and a new one that has been added is the curb extraction, and we're going to see a short video that's showing you how this script works. So here is quite a big data set, our whole street that has been scanned, and the user is now just drawing one segment at the top of the curb, not even just zooming in too much, but that gives an indication for the script to know in which direction to go. And here you see live how the curb line is getting extracted, and you can follow like that the whole flow on the whole area. And you see there's a red line that's the top of the curb and the green line that's the bottom of the curb. So you can just imagine how much time that can potentially we can potentially save thanks to this script here. So that's one that's available, but you can of course write your own as well.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Jennifer. So that leads us to our fourth and final poll question, which Tamara will lead us to.
Okay, so we'd like to know what type of deliverables you're creating in 3D Reshaper or Cyclone 3DR. So please select from one of the following or all the following that apply: meshes, applying texture to mesh, feature extraction or building extraction, contours, volumes, verification, or inspection reports.
This will be another good question to see what the answers are to.
We'll give you a few more moments. Okay, and we're closing the poll.
Yeah, that's good.
That has taken us by surprise, I think.
A bit of everything, really.
It's definitely a bit of everything, but like things like contours and volumes, I was sort of, that's still a lot, but yeah, great. Oh, that's really good. Okay, thanks Tamara, thanks Jennifer. We'll kick on. We're on the home stretch now. So we'll talk a little bit about licensing and migration. So the standard package is the backbone, so to speak, of Cyclone 3DR. And at any time in the future, you can add more functionality with the addition of the survey, AEC, or tank options. As previously mentioned, CloudWorks is now included in the standard package. However, if you know you'll be using functionalities such as creating terrain models and contours or other survey-specific workflows like stockpile measurements, creating sections along tunnels or roads, etc., it makes sense to start with the survey edition. If you know you will be performing verification procedures for BIM projects, working with IFC or native Revit files, or undertaking reverse engineering tasks on heavy machinery, for example, then the AEC edition is the best for you. If you're involved with all of the above, then we have introduced the Pro edition just for you, which is basically everything except for the tank edition. And finally, the tank edition is for those who need to perform more specialized functions related to tank inspection and calibration. Here is the feature matrix showing all the different options, and I suggest you get a copy of this to help you decide which options are best for you. And one other point to make is that the texture functions are now part of survey option, whereas previously texture was a separate model on its own. If you're an existing 3D Reshaper user and you haven't downloaded Cyclone 3DR, I suggest you do so. If you have active CCP, then you'll be able to use both 3D Reshaper and Cyclone 3DR, and this will allow you to test your existing scripts and workflows and start to get familiar with the new interface. If you do not have active CCP, you'll need to renew that to be able to start using Cyclone 3DR. There are a couple of other combinations of migrating paths. For example, if you're still using a 3D Reshaper dongle, for that, I suggest you speak to someone like Jennifer here in Australia, if you're based in Australia. If you're based in New Zealand, speak to the global survey team. Or if you're somewhere else in the world, speak to your local Leica Geosystems representative to get more information on that. And you can see that there's a number of migration paths depending on what option you have. So if you currently have 3D Reshaper base, for example, and you have either survey or texture option, you'll migrate to the survey edition. If you have base and the CAD option, you'll migrate to the AEC edition. A lot of people have the Geosystems pack here in Australia and New Zealand. Has been a very, very popular package. You will migrate to the survey edition. And if you had something like base and CloudWorks, then you would move to the standard option. But as you said, if you have a current valid Cyclone or 3D Reshaper maintenance, then you can start to use Cyclone 3DR. Okay, so couple more slides just to wrap up. So both Cyclone 3DR and Reshaper can be used at the same time to validate that your workflows are still available. So we strongly recommend doing that. Your current Reshaper files are natively compatible with Cyclone 3DR, and the last version of 3D Reshaper is compatible with a 3DR file as well, except there's a limitation on that with the textures and CAD options at the moment. And just to wrap up, Cyclone 3DR is a seamless extension of the Cyclone product family. It's sensor agnostic, and we've actually had a couple questions. We've had a number of questions actually. So if you've had a question in mind, please ask that, and that's one that we'll be answering in a second. It's Cyclone 3DR is powered by Jetstream, or you can use industry standard exchange formats. It's very much domain centric for AEC, survey, and tank workflows, which definitely makes it user friendly. The rich scripting option really just gives you so much flexibility for being able to customize it to what you exactly need to do. So it's very powerful and versatile with a wide array of applications like we talked about. So that's basically the last bit. If you need to contact Jennifer, certainly contact her here in Australia, or the team in New Zealand, or Tamara and I here as well. And before we go on to the questions and answers, Jennifer's been dreading this. She's been here for a couple of years now, and I said, what's your favourite Australian saying? And she didn't. She's got a few good sayings, but I think the one that you've picked up the most is how we say going to. So we tend to shorten it and we say gonna. I'm gonna go to the shops, and you've used that a lot.
Thanks, mate.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, mate. Great. So what we've just got a few more minutes, which is good. We've had a number of questions come through, and which is great to see, and it's always interesting to see these questions that come through. We've had some suggestions for what people would like to see more of, which is one of the things that we're always interested to know for upcoming webinars. And one of those was more information for complex Earth volumes. That's a really good one. Another question was, can you import registered 360 clouds? You can, definitely, using the LGS format. You don't need to export it as an E57 or anything like that. Which leads us on to the next question, is whether we can import other formats into Cyclone 3DR. Most definitely, all the ones that you're used to importing, you can now import. Things like, PTX, FLS files, definitely can import those.
LAS.
Yep, exactly. There's a whole host, and that's one of the great powerful things about Cyclone 3DR, is just all those different formats that you can import. Importing images, just regular images, the traditional way that we used to with Reshaper.
Yeah, absolutely. That's still possible. You can import an image from any source. The only thing is that if you just take a picture like that with your camera, then you might have to use some different function to apply that texture on the mesh. But definitely, yes, you can import pictures from different devices.
So that leads us on to this next question about exporting textures.
So can 3DR also export just the textures and color data as separate maps. It is possible to export the mesh itself as an OBJ, which will have those pictures next to it with an MTL file. I'm not 100% sure if the question was to go into a specific software or not, so we might touch base on that. It's possible to export an ortho image, for example, out of Reshaper.
We've got a couple other questions. I think we'll take these other ones offline. It's talking about some more detailed ones. We'll definitely answer those ones offline in a second. One question is, can you buy one standard license with Survey plus Tank? Most definitely. You can basically tailor what options you want. There's no problems with doing that. A long-time existing Cyclone and 3D Reshaper users. That's really good to see. That's positive feedback, and that's one of the things that I'm really impressed with.
So there was 2 questions on the report. I can potentially answer that quickly. Someone says, can we set the usable scale manually? So I'm imagining that's referring to the picture that was appearing inside the report. So Reshaper computes an automatic scale for the picture to fit this A4 paper, whether it's landscape or portrait, but it is possible to enter a manual scale as well for that image. The only thing is that you wouldn't print on a tracer from Reshaper, so you would still print on A4, maybe A3.
There's another question about 3D mouse support. I don't know if that's on the roadmap, but I know there's a lot of people that use a 3D mouse. I use a 3D mouse sometimes. It's a great device. I don't know about that one.
It was supported in 3D Reshaper, so if that's a big deal for you, you can potentially still use 3D Reshaper in this transition time, maybe. But we'll have to ask the team whether that's coming or not.
Yep. Will there be an option to connect to previous lines or continue a line in 3DR when creating polylines? Well, you can kind of do that now just by snapping to the end of the line. And I guess you could resample it as well, possibly. That one I'll have to check.
It's possible to, there was a function before called chain group lines. So that's definitely chaining lines together. But when you start a new polyline, you create it, and then you have to select the 2 and chain them together. So that is possible.
Great. So if you've got any more questions, certainly send them through and we'll answer those as well. We might call it a day. That was excellent. And that's, I think, just about on time as well. Anyone else got anything else to say?
Thank you for joining us, and to keep up to date with the latest webinars that we have out, please do go to our website to subscribe or keep an eye out on social media channels.
Fantastic, and wish everyone a Merry Christmas as well and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining.